I want to tell you something that took me 14 years to understand. The most dangerous person in a room is not the one who is angry. It is the one who is smiling, who is completely certain she has already won, and who has never once been told she was wrong. I was sitting across from that woman in a conference room on a Tuesday morning, and I had a binder. Before I tell you what happened at the rehearsal dinner, I want to tell you something about the woman who walked into it. Her name is Catherine Ellis, 34 years old, a certified public accountant who built her own practice from a rented desk and borrowed equipment. She put herself through Ohio State on scholarships and waitressing shifts. She paid off every cent she owed. She owned a modest, completely debt-free home before she turned 30. She was not a woman who needed anyone to take care of her. She was a woman who had, quietly and without ceremony, earned everything she had. And she walked into her own rehearsal dinner the way she walked into every room that mattered, composed, prepared, and carrying nothing she did not intend to keep. The Elmfield Inn had a private dining room in the back, past the main restaurant, through a corridor that smelled of calla lilies and industrial kitchen air seeping under the door. White linen tablecloths pulled tight as armor. Warm amber overhead lighting that made everyone look more composed than they felt. A photographer moving between tables with a flash that went off at the wrong moments, catching people mid-sentence, mid-swallow, not quite ready. 40 people. Glasses of wine half-raised. The comfortable noise of people who already knew each other. Nicholas was beside her when she walked in. He was warm. He was present. His hand was on the small of her back, and his voice was light when he introduced her to a gray tent near the door. But there was something else underneath the warmth, something that had been there all week. A bracing, the particular posture of a man who knows what is coming and has decided not to say so. She noticed it. She filed it. Victoria Hargrove was across the room when they entered, 61 years old. Silver hair, precisely set. A navy dress that said occasion without trying. She turned when they came in, and the smile she offered Catherine was practiced, warm on the surface, measured underneath, the smile of a woman who had rehearsed the evening and was now executing it. Catherine. She took both of Catherine's hands. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Victoria." Catherine smiled back. Her smile cost nothing. She had learned early to keep them in reserve. The dinner moved. Salads arrived and were cleared. Wine was refilled. There was laughter from a table near the window where Nicholas's college friends were already telling stories she was not part of. She did not mind that. She was good at being patient in rooms where she was new. It was midway through the main course that Victoria stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The table quieted naturally around her. The way rooms quieted around women who had learned, over decades, exactly how much silence they were owed. She reached beside her chair. She lifted a document, several pages, paper-clipped at the corner, and she walked the length of the table to where Catherine sat. She set it down in front of her. Right on the white linen between the dinner plate and the wine glass in front of 40 people and one photographer. "We've had our family attorney put together a small agreement," Victoria said. Her voice was warm, reasonable, the voice of someone doing a sensible, necessary thing. "Just a family asset protection document. Standard, really. We just need to know you're marrying Nicholas, not the family name." The table went quiet in a particular way, not shocked watching. Catherine picked up the document. She read it, all of it, every paragraph, every clause, every carefully chosen word. It took 4 minutes. No one at the table spoke for 4 minutes. The agreement stated that Catherine would waive any claim to Hargrove family property, investments, or heirlooms in the event of Nicholas's death or the dissolution of their marriage. It was signed at the bottom by Victoria. There was a blank line where Catherine's signature was meant to go. She set it down. She looked at Nicholas. Nicholas looked at the tablecloth. She turned back to Victoria. "I won't be signing anything tonight." Her voice was level, no theatrics, no performance. Simply a statement made clearly by a woman who knew exactly what she was looking at. Victoria's smile did not move. Of course. She picked the document back up. I understand. She walked back to her chair. She sat down. She said something quietly to the woman beside her, something Catherine could not hear. The woman beside her nodded. The dinner resumed. Forks lifted. Conversations restarted. The flash went off again at the wrong moment. The wound did not come from the agreement. The wound came at the toast. Victoria stood at the end of the evening with her glass raised, and she spoke for 4 minutes about family and love and what it meant to welcome someone new and the future that Nicholas deserved. 4 minutes. Catherine's name was not in a single sentence. The caterers were thanked by name, Marie and someone from the kitchen whose name Catherine did not catch. Nicholas's college roommate received a mention. The florist was acknowledged. Catherine sat with her hands in her lap and a smile that cost her something, and she listened to herself be erased from a future she was about to legally enter. 40 people applauded. Nicholas clapped along. If you have ever sat at a formal table, a table with flowers and photographs and people clinking glasses, while someone gave a speech that erased you from a future you were about to walk into, and you sat there with your hands in your lap and a smile that cost you something, and you said nothing, not because you were weak, but because you already understood exactly what was happening and chose not to give them the scene they were expecting, then you already know what that rehearsal dinner felt like. You have been in that room. You know what it takes to stay quiet in it. The drive home was dark, highway lights sliding over the windshield, the particular silence of two people who have been through something and are not yet ready to name it. Nicholas spoke first. Catherine, I'm sorry. Tonight I should have told her, I should have said something before. Are you going to call her? Catherine asked. A pause. Let's just get through tomorrow. She noticed he did not say no. She did not bring it up again. She turned to look at the road. She filed it quietly, precisely in the place where she kept things that mattered but could not yet be addressed. The next morning, she woke in the hotel room. Pale curtains. The flat white light of early June. A single bed with a pillow she reached for without thinking. The note card was tucked beneath it. Small, white, 3 by 5 inches. Nicholas's handwriting neat, architectural, each letter deliberate. June 22, I choose you. N, she did not know when he had put it there. She could not account for when he would have had access to her room. She read it once. Something moved in her chest that she could not name. She tucked it into her wallet, not in a special place, just the main pocket where her fingers would find the edge of it whenever she reached for her credit card. And she went to get ready. She was getting married in 4 hours. She had a copy of the agreement folded in her bag. I kept my copy of the agreement. I folded it, tucked it in my bag, and did not look at it again for 2 years. I did not know yet that it was the least important piece of paper in that room, but I kept it anyway. That's how I was raised. You keep things. You never know when something will matter. I want to tell you something about how exclusion works when it is done well. It does not arrive as a single event. There is no scene you can point to. No moment dramatic enough to justify the weight of what you are carrying. Instead, it comes in accumulation, small, deniable, individually reasonable incidents that build, over years, into something that has no name, but that you feel in your body every time you walk through a particular front door. The Hargrove family home on Elmfield Drive was that kind of door. Christmas, year 2 of the marriage. The house smelled of cinnamon and something slow roasting in the oven. A roast Victoria had been tending since morning, which she would mention at dinner in a way that was meant to sound humble and landed as performance. The decorations were coordinated. The same deep red and gold that appeared in every photograph of every Christmas in that house going back 30 years. Music played at a deliberate volume, present but not intrusive, selected by someone who understood that atmosphere was a form of control. The mudroom near the front door had a row of hooks. Coats, scarves, keys on labeled rings, William's, Sharon's. Nicholas's was there, the one he'd grown up hanging there. Early in the marriage, Nicholas had given Catherine one of her own. "This is your home too," he'd said, "whether they like it or not." She had put it on the hook beside his. Midway through the evening, while the family was settled in the living room and glasses were being refilled, Victoria appeared in the doorway. She looked at the row of hooks. She looked at Catherine with an expression that managed to be both apologetic and completely certain. "Catherine, I've been meaning to mention we're just updating the key situation. New locks just for security. Would you mind?" She held out her hand, waited, in front of William, in front of Sharon, in front of Nicholas's aunt who had come in from Cincinnati. Catherine unclipped the key, set it in Victoria's palm. "Of course," she said, her voice was level. Victoria smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart, you understand." On the drive home, Catherine told Nicholas what had happened. He nodded slowly in the way he nodded when something had confirmed a fear he had already been carrying. "I'll talk to Mom," he said. 2 weeks passed. Nothing changed. She did not bring it up again. Instead, she went to the hardware store, made a copy of the key before returning the original, and put the copy in her jewelry box at home, underneath a bracelet she never wore. She never told Nicholas she'd done it. At the time, I told myself it was just practical. I thought that was the whole of it. It was the beginning of a habit. The photograph happened that summer. Victoria had arranged a family portrait session. A photographer, the backyard of Elmfield Drive, golden afternoon light, the extended family arranged in rows. Catherine had dressed carefully. She stood beside Nicholas and waited while the photographer positioned people, adjusted angles, moved children to the front. Victoria looked at her through the arrangement and said, pleasantly, to no one in particular, "We'll get one of you separately, dear. It'll be easier." Catherine stepped to the side. She stood in the shade of the oak tree at the edge of the yard and watched a photograph of the Hargrove family be taken. Without her, the photographer got one of her separately. She is smiling in it. She looked at it once when it arrived in the envelope with the others and put it face down in a drawer. Nicholas never mentioned it. I do not know if he noticed. Year 5. A Hargrove investment property had been sitting on the market too long, priced incorrectly, generating carrying costs and drawing the wrong buyers. Catherine, using her professional expertise, modeled a timing strategy that would take advantage of a narrow capital gains window. 3 weeks of work. Financial modeling, a written recommendation submitted to Nicholas, phone calls to the broker and the estate accountant. The strategy was executed. The family saved $14,000. The following weekend, Victoria sent a thank you note. Nicholas brought it to her. He set it on the kitchen counter with a pleased expression, the expression of a man who believes something good has just happened. Mom sent a note. She's really grateful. Catherine picked it up. "Dear Nicholas, thank you for your help with the property. The family is grateful. With love, Mother." She read it twice. She set it back on the counter. She said nothing. Nicholas waited. "She means you too, obviously. You know how she is with." "I know," Catherine said. "Thank you for showing me." She went back to what she was doing. She sent the thank you note to Nicholas. I had done all the work, the modeling, the timing, the execution, the 3 weeks of phone calls, and she sent the thank you note to Nicholas. I want to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever done the work and watched someone else receive the gratitude? Not by accident, not because anyone forgot, but because the person giving thanks simply could not make themselves direct it at you, because directing it at you would mean seeing you, and seeing you was never part of the arrangement. I wonder sometimes if Victoria even knew she was doing it. And then I remember, of course she did. I kept everything, the spreadsheets, the recommendation, the email chain. Filed, labeled, dated. At the time, I told myself it was for tax purposes. That wasn't the only reason. I am going to tell you something about how I decided to tell this story. I did not start until I had everything. I did not open my mouth until I had the receipts on the table in front of me. That is not how I was raised to be dramatic. That is how I was raised to be right. If you are new here, this channel is where we tell the truth about families. the whole truth, with documentation. Subscribe so you know how this ends. Victoria's line found me for the first time at an Easter dinner, year 3. I had brought a written estimate for a home repair project she was being badly overcharged for because that is what I do, because I saw the invoice and recognized the markup immediately, because it was a Tuesday and I thought it might help. She read it. She smiled. She set it down. And then she turned to the table and said, warmly, as though she were sharing a fond observation, "Catherine has always been more comfortable with paperwork than with people. That's just who she is." The table smiled. Someone laughed lightly, the way you laugh at something affectionate. I smiled too. By year 5, I had heard that line 3 times. Deployed in different rooms, different contexts, always with the same warm delivery. Always when I had just done something that required acknowledgement. Always landing just softly enough that I could not object without sounding as though I had misunderstood. I had not misunderstood. And then, in year 7, Nicholas's father died. I organized the memorial service. Every detail, the venue, the catering, the RSVP, the order of service, the flowers, I drove there myself on the morning of the service. 3 weeks of phone calls. I did it because it was right. I did not do it for recognition. I sat in the 3rd pew. Victoria gave the eulogy. She thanked the whole family by name. William, Sharon, the grandchildren, the longtime family friends who had sent cards. I counted the names. Mine was not among them. I drove home alone that evening, and I sat in my driveway for a few minutes before I went inside. And I made a decision I had been approaching for years. I stopped expecting anything different. And when you stop expecting, you start preparing. That is when everything changed. Not for them, for me. Nicholas died on a Tuesday morning in March. He was 41 years old. He was in the kitchen when it happened, the kitchen of the house they had shared for 9 years, the one with the east-facing window that caught the morning light in a way that had made her choose it. He was making coffee. She was upstairs getting ready for work. She heard him fall. I am not going to describe those minutes. Some things do not belong to a story. They belong only to the person who lived them. What I will tell you is this. By the time I had finished my second phone call, the hospital, and then Nicholas's brother, his family was already on their way. I had not asked them to come. They arrived before the evening was out. Victoria first, then William and Sharon, then 2 aunts whose names I could never keep straight, who moved through my kitchen with the confidence of women returning to a place they considered theirs. Someone turned on the television. Someone reorganized my refrigerator. Someone made coffee using the wrong filters. I could smell it from the top of the stairs, thin and slightly burnt, filling a house that was not ready for any of this. Victoria was in the living room. I could hear her voice, steady, directive, the voice she used when she was managing a situation. "We'll need to call the church in the morning. William, write that down. And someone should go through Nicholas's office before the week is out." His office, in my house, before the week is out. I stood up. I went to the upstairs bathroom. I closed the door. I sat down on the cold tile floor with my back against the bathtub, and I stayed there. I want to pause here because I think some of you already know what I am about to describe. There is a specific kind of grief that happens when you lose someone and the people around you cannot agree that you are the right person to grieve. You are in your own home. You are the widow, and somehow, you end up in an upstairs bathroom because the kitchen has been reorganized by people who arrived without being invited, who speak about arrangements in a voice that suggests they are the ones who get to make them. If you have lived that, I am so sorry. I know exactly what that bathroom floor feels like. The light above the mirror was too bright. The house smelled wrong. Funeral flowers had already started arriving, left on the front porch by neighbors, and someone had brought them inside, and the smell of them was thick and ceremonial in a house that was not ready to be a house of mourning yet. It had been 6 hours. I reached into my pocket for my phone. My hand found my wallet instead. I took out the note card. Small, white, worn at the edges now after 9 years in my wallet, not fragile, just softened, the way things get when they have been carried a long time. His handwriting still precise. June 22, I choose you. Sen. I had read this card hundreds of times in quiet moments, in hard ones. But that night on the bathroom floor, it had a different weight entirely. It was not sentiment. It was the only document in the world at that moment that said he had chosen me, that I was the one, that whatever was happening downstairs, whatever arrangements were being made in whatever voice, this card was the counter-record. Simple, private, his handwriting. My name implied in every word of it. I sat with it for a long time. I did not cry. I had cried already alone before they arrived. What I felt now was something quieter and more focused than crying. I put the card back in my wallet. I stood up. I went back downstairs. The funeral was a week later. Victoria stood at the door of the church accepting condolences for 40 minutes before the service began. People embraced her. People pressed her hands. A photographer from the family, a cousin with a good camera, moved through the crowd, and in every photograph taken that morning, Victoria was at the center. Her arms around grandchildren, her head bowed in prayer, her profile composed and buried in the candlelight. In every photograph, I was slightly to the left, almost in the frame. Almost. I stood in the third pew. I had sat in the third pew before, I realized, at Edward Hargrove's memorial, the one I had organized alone. The third pew was apparently where I belonged in this family, close enough to be present, far enough to be deniable. At the reception afterward, Victoria said to me, quietly, at the edge of the room, with the particular gentleness of a woman who believes she is being kind, "You know, Nicholas always worried about you, whether you'd be all right on your own. He knew you weren't comfortable with the emotional side of things." She touched my arm. "We'll take care of the arrangements going forward. You don't need to trouble yourself." Catherine has always been more comfortable with paperwork than with people. In a new form, wearing grief as its disguise. I thanked her. I went home. 2 weeks after the funeral, on a Tuesday morning, William came to the house. He said he was checking on me. He sat at my kitchen table with his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he had poured himself without asking. And for the first 12 minutes we talked about Nicholas, memories, mostly the kind that are safe and general and cost nothing. Then his posture shifted, slightly, the way a conversation shifts when it has been waiting to become something else. "Catherine, I want to make sure you're taken care of through all of this. Nicholas would have wanted things handled cleanly. Simply, the estate doesn't have to be complicated if no one makes it complicated." He looked at me steadily. "Do you have an attorney yet?" "Yes," I said. Something moved behind his eyes. "You retained someone already?" "The morning after the funeral." He set down his mug. He asked me one more question about which firm, which attorney, and I gave him the name. He nodded. He said that was probably wise. He said it in a tone that suggested it was not wise at all. He left 22 minutes after he arrived. Now, before I tell you what came next, I want to tell you something I have not mentioned yet. 2 months after the wedding, I had the family asset protection agreement reviewed by an attorney. The one Victoria had presented at the rehearsal dinner, in front of 40 people, with her rehearsed smile in her certain hands. I kept my copy. I had it looked at, and what I was told in a very short meeting, in very clear language, changed how I understood the 9 years that followed. I am not going to tell you the full details yet, but I will tell you this. Victoria spent 9 years believing she had covered herself with that document. She was wrong. She had never been right. And the certainty she carried about what that agreement meant, the confidence that had let her stand at the rehearsal dinner like a woman who had already won, was built on paper that was never what she thought it was. I knew this. I had known it since 2 months after the wedding. I said nothing for 9 years. William left 22 minutes after he arrived. I wrote down the date and the conversation in a legal pad I had started keeping the morning after the funeral. It was the first page. It would not be the last. And 18 months later, When the estate attorney called me with news I was not expecting, I understood why I had been keeping that pad all along. Because what he found in the documents, what Nicholas had done quietly, without telling me, was either the most important thing my husband ever did or the most dangerous thing. I did not yet know which. I was about to find out. 18 months is a long time to live inside a proceeding. That is what estate work is. When there are assets and disputes and attorneys on multiple sides, a proceeding. A formal, documented, slow-moving process that requires you to be organized and present and functional on days when you would rather be none of those things. I was good at it. I had always been good at managing complexity inside structure. My attorney, a careful man named Gerald who wore the same style of reading glasses in every meeting, told me once that I was the most prepared client he had worked with in 30 years of practice. I told him I had learned from an early age that preparation was the only thing you could fully control. He wrote something down. He did not ask what I meant. The conference room at Gerald's firm was on the 4th floor of a mid-sized building on the west side of the city. Functional, not impressive. A long table that seated 8 comfortably and held 3 of us that afternoon without any of us feeling crowded. A water pitcher, untouched. A window overlooking a parking lot with a single oak tree at the far edge that was older than the building around it, its roots probably lifting the pavement underneath in ways no one had addressed yet. Fluorescent overhead light, the particular flatness of it, the way it made everything look like evidence. Gerald set a thick file folder on the table. He opened it. He found a specific page. He knew exactly where it was, had clearly been to it before this meeting, had prepared the way careful men prepare when they are about to tell you something that will require a moment to absorb. He turned it to face me. "This came up in the routine document review," he said. "I want you to read it before I say anything about it." I read it. It was a deed amendment, filed with the county on October 14, 2009. Notarized. Recorded. Nicholas Hargrove transferring 50% of his co-ownership interest in 4 Elmfield Drive, the Hargrove family home, to Catherine Ellis Hargrove. My name. On a deed for a property I had never been told I had any claim to. Filed 6 years into our marriage. Filed without my knowledge. Filed, notarized, and recorded by a man who came home that evening. I was trying to remember, sitting there, what October 14, 2009 had looked like, what we had eaten for dinner, whether he had seemed different and said nothing. "This is legitimate," Gerald said quietly. "There is no ambiguity. It was filed correctly, the notary's stamp is valid, and it has been on the county record for 6 years. Nicholas held a 50% co-ownership interest in the property, inherited jointly with his brother upon his father's death in 2007. He transferred half of that interest to you. You hold 25% of 4 Elmfield Drive, Catherine, legally, irrevocably." I looked at the document for a long moment. "He never told me," I said. "No," Gerald said. "It appears not. Stay with me because I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that is the whole story. He protected her. She wins. But I need you to understand that at this moment, sitting in that conference room, reading my own name on a deed I had never seen, I did not feel like I was winning anything. I felt like I was meeting a version of my husband I had not known existed. A version who knew things I did not. Who had looked at our life and our family and seen something I had perhaps not let myself see clearly, and had responded to it, quietly and legally and permanently, without telling me, because he knew that if he told me, I would spend years worrying about the conflict it would create. He knew me. He knew that. And I was sitting in a fluorescent-lit conference room finding this out 2 years after I could no longer ask him about it. That is not winning. That is something else entirely. Something that does not have a clean name. Victoria's response arrived through her attorney the same afternoon. Gerald read it to me over the phone that evening. 4 sentences. The last one was, This must be some kind of error. Nicholas would not have done this without discussion. I sat with that for a moment. Nicholas did not discuss it because he knew what discussion would have cost. He knew what his family did with information. He knew that an announced intention was a target and a filed document was a fact, and he had chosen, deliberately, to give me a fact instead of a conversation that could be managed, pressured, or undone. Victoria's attorney was informed in writing that there was no error. The document was valid. The filing was correct. The notary's stamp was legitimate. Catherine Ellis Hargrove was a co-owner of record. Victoria called William that evening. I know this because William called me the following morning and said, with the particular stiffness of a man delivering a prepared message, "Catherine, Mom is very upset. She feels this isn't what Nicholas intended. She'd like to sit down, just family, and work through what a fair arrangement looks like without bringing outside parties into it." Outside parties? He meant my attorney. "Tell Victoria I appreciate her reaching out," I said. "All communications should go through Gerald's office." William was quiet for a moment. "Catherine, you're making this harder than it needs to be." "I'm making it documented," I said. "There's a difference." He did not call again that week. I want to tell you what 25% of a family home means when that family spent 9 years telling you that you did not belong in it. It means nothing. No sale, no transfer, no resolution can happen without your signature. The woman Victoria tried to cut out before the wedding cake was ordered was now, legally, inside the house. The house on Elmfield Drive. The 4-bedroom colonial that Victoria had used as trophy and weapon for 30 years. The gathering place, the photograph backdrop, the physical proof that the Hargroves were still the Hargroves. Catherine Ellis Hargrove was on the deed, filed in 2009, while Victoria was still running her exclusion campaign, while the thank you notes were still being addressed to Nicholas, while the photograph from the summer portrait session still sat face down in Catherine's drawer. He did it then, quietly, and said nothing, I thought, sitting in the parking garage afterward before I could make myself drive, that I finally understood him. That this was the clearest thing Nicholas had ever communicated to me, clearer than any conversation, any apology on any car ride home. I thought that was the full picture. I was not finished being wrong about that. I drove home that evening and I stood in my kitchen for a long time without turning on the light. And then I remembered something. Nicholas and I had a joint safe deposit box at the bank on Cresthaven Road. I had not opened it since the week after he died. I had taken what I needed for the estate, the insurance documents, the vehicle titles, our passports. I had not looked at everything. I had not had the capacity to look at everything. I went back the next morning. I had opened the box once before in the fog of the first week. I took what I thought I needed and closed it. I was not, at that point, capable of being thorough. And when I opened the box all the way this time, past the things I recognized, past the documents I had already cataloged, I found an envelope I had never seen before. Sealed. My name on the front, his handwriting. The envelope sat on the kitchen table for 1 hour and 14 minutes before I opened it. I had brought it home from the bank the previous afternoon, still sealed, and set it on the table and made dinner and eaten standing at the counter. I had stopped sitting down to meals for a while after Nicholas died, a habit I had never quite explained to myself, and then I had gone to bed and lain awake for most of the night and come downstairs at 5:30 and made coffee and sat down across from it in the flat gray light of very early morning. The east-facing window was letting in the beginning of the day, not sunrise yet, just the suggestion of it. The kind of light that has not yet committed to anything. The house was completely quiet. My coffee went cold. I sat there, and I looked at the envelope, and I tried to prepare myself for whatever it contained. I thought about what it might say. I thought, a note about the deed, an explanation, a reason. I thought, he is going to tell me he meant to tell me sooner and ran out of time. I thought I was ready. I was not ready. His handwriting on the front of the envelopes, my name, in his neat architectural print, was so precise and so completely him that sitting with it for an hour was its own kind of conversation. I picked it up. I opened it. I put on my reading glasses. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten on his personal stationery, the cream-colored paper with his initials at the top that he had ordered once and used almost never, for things that required something more deliberate than a text message or an email. He had not dated it, but he mentioned, in the second paragraph, something that had happened in early 2013, a conversation with his cardiologist, a follow-up appointment after a hospitalization the previous fall. I knew the appointment. I had driven him there. I had sat in the waiting room with a crossword puzzle I did not finish. I had not known what was said in that room. He wrote, "The doctor used words I want to believe were precautionary. I am choosing to act as though they were not." He wrote about the deed amendment. October 2009. He explained that he had gone to a real estate attorney alone on a Tuesday afternoon, told no one where he was going. He paid the filing fee in cash, no credit card statement, no paper trail his mother could have found if she had ever gone through his accounts. He said, "I did not tell you because you would have spent the next decade managing the conflict it might create. You would have protected me from having to deal with my family about it. I did not want you to protect me from that. I wanted to protect you from something worse." He described what he expected his mother to do if he died first. He was not wrong about a single detail. Every step he had predicted, Victoria's certainty, William's pressure, the framing of Catherine's rights as aggression, had happened in the precise sequence he had anticipated. He had written it out in 2013, 2 years before his death, as though he were describing something that had already occurred. He knew his family. He had always known his family. He wrote, "I know what they will say. The documents say something else." And then, near the end of the 3rd page, in handwriting that was slightly less precise than the rest, as though the pen had slowed or the hand had, he wrote, "You were never just a wife to me. You were the proof that I had better judgment than anyone in my family ever gave me credit for. I am sorry I could not always show that in the room. I showed it the only way I knew how to make it permanent." I set the letter down on the kitchen table. I reached for my coffee, cold. I stood up. I went to make another cup. Standing at the counter, waiting for the machine, I reached into the pocket of my cardigan. I had started keeping my wallet there lately, closer than a bag, more available, and I put my hand over it. I didn't take the note card out. I just held my hand there. I knew it was there. That was enough. I have thought about this a great deal since that morning. Nicholas was not the husband who stood up and said what needed to be said when it needed to be said. He was not the man who called his mother after the rehearsal dinner. He was not the man who redirected the thank you note. He was not the man who said to his family, in a room where it would have cost him something, "She is my wife, and you will treat her accordingly." He failed me in those moments. I am not going to soften that. You already know it. So do I. But he was also a man who sat alone in a real estate attorney's office on a Tuesday afternoon in 2009 with a property deed and a working pen, and made something permanent that his family could never undo with a phone call or a family dinner or a carefully worded conversation. He was a man who wrote 3 pages on cream stationery in 2013, sealed them in an envelope, and put them in a box for me to find when I needed them most. He was not the hero I needed in the room. He was the hero he could manage to be in the documents. I do not know what to call that. It is not enough, and it is also a great deal. Some of you know exactly what I mean. While I was sitting at that table, a letter arrived by courier from Victoria's attorney. Gerald called me that afternoon to read it. It stated that the estate matter could be resolved simply and amicably if Catherine would agree to an informal meeting with the family, without the involvement of outside counsel, which tends to complicate what are essentially family conversations. Outside counsel. Gerald's response to Victoria's attorney was 4 sentences. The last one was, Mrs. Hargrove is represented in all matters relating to the estate and the property. Direct all future communications to this office. I asked Gerald what Victoria's attorney had said when he called to confirm receipt. Gerald said. He asked if there was any room for flexibility. What did you tell him? I told him there was a great deal of flexibility in how we proceed, and none whatsoever in whether you are represented. Victoria's attorney sent that letter the same week Nicholas's letter was on my kitchen table. She believed she still had options. That a woman who had spent 9 years being managed could be managed a little longer. She did not know about the safe deposit box. She did not know what Nicholas had written. She was calculating based on what she knew. She did not know nearly enough. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time after I finished reading, and when I finally got up, I did not call anyone. I did not go for a walk. I did not cry, though I had done plenty of that in the months before. I did one thing. I called the attorney, not to ask questions. I had no more questions. I called to tell him I was ready to begin. The letter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in early spring. I had come in from the office, set my bag on the kitchen counter, gone through the mail the way I always did, standing up, coat still on, the particular efficiency of a woman who has learned not to let correspondence wait. Bills, a catalog, 2 pieces of junk mail, and then an envelope with a law firm's return address in the upper left corner. Hargrove Family Council. Heavy paper stock, the kind of envelope that knows it carries something formal. I opened it at the kitchen table. Afternoon light coming through the window at a low angle, the kind that makes everything look slightly more significant than it is. The letter was 3 paragraphs. The offer was in the second one, $8,000, for my 25% co-ownership interest in a property that a neutral appraiser had recently valued at $487,000. $8,000. The letter described this as a recognition of Mrs. Hargrove's years of contribution to the family. It noted that the offer was generous given the informal nature of the property arrangement, and encouraged Catherine to consider the emotional cost of prolonged proceedings versus the opportunity to move forward with closure. I read it twice. I set it on the table. I took off my coat. Let me make sure you understood that number correctly. $8,000. That is what they offered. For a 25% ownership interest in a property that would sell for nearly $500,000. $8,000 for 9 years of marriage, 4 hospitalizations, 9 Christmases, a memorial service organized alone, and $14,000 in professional financial work I never once invoiced them for. I want you to sit with that number, just for a moment. $8,000, because I think you already know what that number was really saying. It wasn't an offer. It was a message. It was Victoria Hargrove, one more time in one more form, telling me exactly what she had always believed my presence in her family had been worth. The answer apparently was $8,000. I picked up the phone. I called Gerald. By the time the offer arrived, William had left 3 voicemails across the preceding 3 months. The first, in March, was warm, careful. He said he was thinking of me, that he knew this was a hard time for everyone, that he hoped we could find a way through it that honored Nicholas's memory. He used the phrase, what Nicholas would have wanted twice. He did not specify what that was. The second, in May, was different. His voice had tightened. He said the estate was taking too long, that Catherine's legal team was making things complicated that did not need to be complicated, that the family was not going to keep waiting indefinitely while outside attorneys run up bills on a process that should have been simple. Outside attorneys, Victoria's language, delivered in William's voice. The third voicemail arrived in July. He said, Catherine, I have tried to be patient. I have tried to give you space. But what you are doing, holding that property claim over my mother's head, refusing to sit down like an adult and have a real conversation, It is not what Nicholas would have wanted. He would be ashamed of this. I want you to think about that. He would be ashamed. Nicholas, who had gone alone to a real estate attorney in 2009 and filed a deed amendment in cash and sealed a letter in an envelope for me to find after he was gone. William was invoking Nicholas's name to pressure Nicholas's wife into surrendering what Nicholas had built for her. I listened to that voicemail once. I set my phone down. I opened my laptop. I typed out every word. Gerald submitted the voicemail transcripts to Victoria's attorney with a formal letter directing all future communication through legal channels. He also submitted something else that week, something I had not fully anticipated would be available, but which the estate document review had surfaced quietly several weeks earlier. The reverse mortgage. In 2014, Victoria had taken out a reverse mortgage on the Hargrove family home. $180,000 in immediate liquidity secured against the property. The loan had been executed with Victoria's sole signature. The property, at the time, was co-owned by both her sons. State law required notification of all co-owners before a reverse mortgage could be executed against jointly held property. That notification had not occurred. Neither Nicholas nor William had been informed. The disclosure requirement had not been met. This was not a criminal matter, but it was a documented violation, now formally part of the estate record. The woman who had spent 14 years presenting herself as the transparent family matriarch had made a $180,000 financial decision in secret against property her sons co-owned. Victoria's attorney received this information on a Thursday. Victoria learned about it on a Friday. I was told, through Gerald, that the call had not gone well. Gerald also submitted the capital gains documentation that week. My spreadsheets from 2008, the written recommendation I had prepared and submitted to Nicholas, who had forwarded it to Victoria, showing the timing strategy, the analysis, the projected savings. The thank you note Victoria had sent to Nicholas, in Victoria's handwriting, with my name absent from every line. That note was now part of the formal estate record, because Nicholas had kept it. Of course he had kept it. That evening, I was in my home office, working late. The desk lamp was the only light on in the house. The printer in the corner had been running for an hour, transcripts, correspondence, copies of documents for the binder that now occupied an entire shelf behind me. 6 labeled sections, each one tabbed, dated, cross-referenced. I reached for a paperclip in the desk drawer and my hand brushed my wallet, sitting at the corner of the desk where I had set it that morning. I didn't open it. I just moved it aside to make room for the voicemail transcript I was clipping. It sat at the edge of my peripheral vision for the rest of the evening. I was thinking about something Victoria had said to a mutual acquaintance, a woman from her church who had run into a colleague of mine at an event and passed it along, the way these things travel in small social circles. Catherine has always been more comfortable with paperwork than with people. This whole situation is proof of that. She is turning a family matter into a filing cabinet. A filing cabinet, yes, with 6 labeled sections. Gerald called the following morning to confirm that Victoria's attorney had received all materials and acknowledged the reverse mortgage disclosure documentation. How did they respond? I asked. They asked for 2 weeks to consult with their client. Did you give it to them? I gave them 10 days, Gerald said, and I told them we would be requesting a formal mediated settlement at the end of that window, with all parties represented and a neutral mediator present. There was a brief silence. Victoria's attorney asked if there was any possibility of resolving this informally, without the mediation structure. What did you say? I told him that Mrs. Hargrove had always been more comfortable with documentation than with informal arrangements. A pause. I thought you might appreciate that. I did. On the morning of the settlement meeting, I packed 1 binder. I put on a dress I would wear to a business meeting, nothing special, nothing theatrical. I drove to a conference building on the other side of the city, and I sat in the parking garage for 6 minutes before I went inside. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted to be still for 6 more minutes before a room full of people found out what 14 years of keeping paper trails looks like when you finally open the binder. I want to tell you what happened when the door closed. The conference room was on the 3rd floor of a building I had never been to before and will likely never return to. Neutral ground. That is the point of a mediation firm, a space that belongs to no one, that carries no one's history, that has absorbed enough of other people's worst days that it retains nothing. The carpet was the particular shade of gray that suggests it was chosen specifically to show nothing. The air recycled itself quietly. There was a coffee machine in the corner that smelled of something burnt and old, and no one touched it the entire morning. A long table. 8 chairs. 5 people seated. Catherine and Gerald on one side, Victoria and her attorney directly across, the mediator at the head. A court reporter in the far corner, her machine already running, her face arranged into the specific neutrality of someone paid to record everything and react to nothing. The door closed. Victoria was dressed carefully. Navy, again, the same considered choice she had made at the rehearsal dinner 14 years ago. Armor that looked like elegance. Her posture was composed. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her. She had arrived. I could see, fully certain of something, certain of her version, her narrative, the story she had been telling about this family and this marriage and this dispute for 2 years. She looked at me across the table the way she had always looked at me, as though she already knew how this would end. She was about to find out. Gerald opened the binder. He did not announce what he was doing. He did not offer a preamble. He simply found the first labeled section, removed the top document, and placed it on the center of the table where every person in the room could read it. The Family Asset Protection Agreement. June 2003. The document Victoria had set on a white linen tablecloth in front of 40 people and a photographer and said, "We just need to know you're marrying Nicholas, not the family name." Victoria's attorney leaned forward slightly. Gerald placed a second document beside it. A written legal opinion, dated November 2003, 2 months after the wedding. 1 page, signed by a licensed family law attorney. It stated, in plain language, that the agreement, as drafted, was not legally enforceable in this jurisdiction. The attorney who had prepared it was not licensed to practice family law in the state. The waiver language would not survive a challenge in any court. The document Victoria had wielded for 14 years as proof that she had protected her family. The document she had presented with a rehearsed smile and a confident hand had never been more than paper with the appearance of teeth. Victoria looked at it. She said nothing. "Mrs. Hargrove has been in possession of a legal opinion regarding this document since shortly after her marriage," Gerald said to the room. "She chose not to deploy it, she simply kept it." That was all he said about it. He moved to the next section. Receipt 2, the deed amendment. October 14, 2009. Gerald read the filing date, the notary's name, the recorded interest. Catherine Ellis Hargrove, 25% co-owner, 4 Elmfield Drive. He set the document on the table beside the agreement. Victoria's attorney said carefully, "We maintain that the circumstances of this filing warrant further examination." Gerald said, "The filing is clean, notarized, and has been on the county record for 8 years. We are not here to examine the filing. We are here to proceed from it." Receipt 3, the reverse mortgage disclosure documents. 2014. Victoria's signature alone on a property co-owned by her sons. The missed notification requirement placed on the table. Gerald read the relevant statute aloud. 1 sentence, 12 words. Victoria's attorney did not speak. Victoria looked at that document for a long time. Receipt 4, Catherine's spreadsheets from 2008, the written recommendation, the capital gains analysis, the $14,000 savings, documented line by line in Catherine's handwriting, and beside it, the thank you note, Victoria's handwriting, addressed to Nicholas. Not a single mention of the woman who had done every hour of the work. Nicholas kept it, Gerald said simply. It was in his personal files. The table was quiet. Receipt 5, William's voicemail transcripts, all 3. Gerald read the third one aloud, in the same neutral voice he had used for every document. Nicholas would be ashamed of what you're doing. The words landed in the room and stayed there. William did not look up from the table, and then Gerald reached the final section. He removed the letter. 3 pages. Cream stationery, Nicholas's handwriting. He read it without inflection, without editorial. The way a court reporter records, as though the words belong only to themselves and require nothing additional from the person delivering them. He read the part about the deed amendment. He read the part about the doctor's appointment in 2012. He read, I know my family. I know what they will say. The documents say something else. He read the last paragraph, the part about judgment. The part that ended, I showed it the only way I knew how to make it permanent. He set the letter down. The room was silent. There is a specific silence that happens when a group of people who have been very certain of something realize, all at the same moment, that they were wrong. It is not loud. It does not sound like anything from the outside. But if you have ever been in that room on either side of that table, you know what it feels like when the air changes. When 14 years of dismissal meets 14 years of documentation. When the woman they decided was only comfortable with paperwork walks in with the paperwork. That silence lasted 11 minutes. I know because the court reporter's record shows it. Victoria spoke first. She looked at me. Her voice was quiet, controlled. The voice of a woman who has nothing left but the one story she has always carried and is not yet willing to set it down. You were never really part of this family, she said, and Nicholas knew it. I had been waiting for 14 years to be in a room where that sentence could finally be answered correctly. I did not answer it with words, not first. I opened my wallet. The note card was where it had always been, in the main pocket, worn soft at the edges after 15 years of being carried, the white of it slightly warmer now than when it was new. Small, unassuming. His handwriting still precise, still him, still the neatest thing about a man who was often untidy in the ways that mattered most. I set it on the conference table. In the center, where the mediator and the court reporter and both attorneys could see it. He wrote this on the morning of our wedding, I said. He put it under my pillow the night before. I have carried it in my wallet for 15 years. I looked at Victoria. June 22, I choose you. I let that sit for a moment. He chose, that is the document that mattered most. I did not raise my voice. I did not look away. Victoria looked away first. Her attorney leaned toward her. She did not respond. She was looking at the binder, 14 years of paper, 6 labeled sections, organized by the woman she had once called more comfortable with paperwork than people. The mediator asked if both parties were prepared to proceed to settlement terms. Both parties were. The settlement was signed at 3:47 in the afternoon. I watched Victoria sign it. I watched her attorney gather the documents into his briefcase. I watched the mediator close his folder and the court reporter lift her hands from her machine for the first time in hours. And then I picked up the note card from the center of the table. I put it back in my wallet. I picked up my binder. I stood up. I walked out of a room I had been preparing to enter for 2 years. What came after that is the part of the story I care about most. It is not the money. It is not the house. It is something quieter than either of those things, and I want to tell it to you right. The house on Elmfield Drive sold in December. 4 bedrooms. A 4-bedroom colonial built in 1962, renovated in 1994. Located on a street whose social prestige Victoria Hargrove had spent 30 years carefully cultivating through the specific alchemy of coordinated decorations, church committee work, and the quiet, constant performance of a family that had things. The property appraised at $487,000. It sold at appraisal. No one disputed the number. No attorney in the room had grounds to. After the reverse mortgage payoff, $180,000 of debt Victoria had taken on in secret against property her sons co-owned. And after the estate fees and the closing costs and the settlement distributions, Catherine received $89,000. Fair market value, calculated by a neutral appraiser, signed off on by every attorney present. $89,000 for a 25% interest in a house she had never lived in, never held a key to for more than 2 years, never once been made to feel she belonged in. Nicholas had been right about the math, too. Victoria could not explain the sale cleanly. That is the particular consequence of building your entire identity around a house when the house goes. The explanation has to go somewhere. And the story Victoria had always told about the Hargrove family did not have a version that included a deed amendment she didn't know about, a reverse mortgage she took in secret, and a daughter-in-law who had quietly kept every document for 14 years. Her church friends noticed the sale. Neighbors noticed. People who had attended 30 years of Hargrove Christmas gatherings and Easter dinners on Elmfield Drive noticed. They asked. Victoria answered. I do not know exactly what she said. I did not need to know. The story that circulated in her social circle was not the story she told. It was close enough to the truth that it did not require my correction, and far enough from her preferred version that she could not control it. That was consequence enough. I did not engineer it. I did not need to. Truth, properly documented and formally presented, has its own momentum. It does not require help spreading. William moved out of the property Victoria owned in the spring. His rent-free arrangement, 11 years of it, a fact that had surfaced quietly in the estate documentation and been noted without comment by Gerald, was reevaluated in the context of the settlement. He vacated. He told people it was his choice, that he had been meaning to simplify for a while, that it was the right time. He was not a young man. I did not think about William very much after that. He was not a complicated person. He had done what uncomplicated people do when given access to a complicated family structure. He had used it for as long as it was available, and he would find another arrangement when this one closed. Sharon sent me a card, the second one in 2 years. This one had a handwritten note inside, not a Hallmark verse, not a 3-word line, but a full paragraph in her own handwriting. She said she was sorry. Not for the legal proceeding, she was too careful for that, but for the years before it. She named specific things. The memorial service, the Christmas with the key. I read it once. I held it for a moment, the way you hold something that arrives too late but is nonetheless genuine. I did not respond, not because I was cruel. I hope I am not a cruel person, but because there was nothing left to say that would not reopen something I had finally been allowed to close. The time for Sharon's genuine gestures was the 3rd pew at a memorial service in 2012. She had sat 4 rows back instead. I put the card in a drawer. I did not throw it away. That is all the grace I had available, and I believe it was enough. There was no final confrontation with Victoria, no phone call, no letter, no last word exchanged over a cup of tea with things finally said that had never been said. The mutual release clause in the settlement agreement meant our legal relationship was concluded. Our personal relationship had concluded years before that, in increments too small to name individually but too large, accumulated to survive. She did not call. I did not write. In the weeks after the settlement, I kept waiting for something, one more move, one more letter. I had been vigilant for so long that the silence felt unfamiliar. But the weeks passed, and I understood slowly that it was over. 2 months after the settlement, on a Saturday morning in November, I was sitting on the back porch with my coffee. East-facing light, late autumn, the kind that is warm on the face but cool on the hands. The railing under my palm was smooth from years of being held in exactly this way, on exactly these mornings. My garden was visible from where I sat, a small rectangle of raised beds and winter bare perennials I had planted in year 3 of living in this house. Before the binder, before the legal pad, before the estate attorney's conference room and the mediation firm's gray carpet and the court reporter's machine. The garden was older than all of it. It had been there quietly through everything. I sat there for a long time, not processing, not reviewing, not preparing for anything. Just sitting in November light with a mug going warm in my hands and a garden that had survived 14 winters and would survive more. Later that morning, at the kitchen table, I was getting ready to go to the grocery store. I went through my wallet for the loyalty card. My fingers found the note card first. I took it out. Small and white, soft at the edges now, 15 years of being carried will do that to paper. We'll warm it and wear it until it becomes something closer to cloth than card. His handwriting still precise on the front, still him, still the most deliberate thing about a man who often said the right thing too quietly and in the wrong room. June 22, I choose you. And I read it, though I have not needed to read it for years. The words have been in my memory longer than they have needed to be on paper. But I read it anyway, the way you return to certain things not because you have forgotten them, but because the act of returning is itself the point. I put it back. I found the grocery card. I finished my coffee. I went to the store. The note card went back where it has always been. It is not a relic. It is not a monument. It is not something I will frame or protect behind glass or retire to a box with a ribbon on it. It is a fact, stated simply and privately by a man who meant it. On the morning he chose to spend the rest of his life with me, and I have been carrying that fact for 15 years. I will carry it going forward. That is what love looks like when it has nowhere dramatic to go. It goes back in the wallet. It goes to the grocery store. It keeps quietly being true. I want to tell you something before I go. I did not need Victoria Hargrove to see me. I understand that now. I think I understood it earlier than I was able to say. She was never going to see me. That was not a malfunction of the situation. That was the situation. Some people have decided before you walk through the door that they will not see you. And you can spend years trying to change that decision, and you will not change it because it was never really about you. It was about them. What I needed was not her recognition. What I needed was to still be standing in a room where the truth could be stated clearly, on the record, in front of people who were required to listen to it. And I was still standing. That was enough. That is more than enough. It is everything. I never needed them to see me. I just needed to still be standing when it mattered. And I was.